third most powerful man in Israeli politics.
Israel's Speaker of the Knesset, Amir Ohana.
Welcome to the Knesset, Stefan. Welcome to Jerusalem. Samuel Huntington that was talking about the clash of civilizations. I believe this is what we are experiencing now with the waves of migration coming towards European countries. Muammar Gaddafi that said, we shall conquer Europe without a single shot. Small numbers, they seek to assimilate. When we're talking about large numbers, they seek to dominate. We did not believe that such an event could take place here in Israel. So I'm saying to everyone watching us, from London to Paris to Warsaw, we didn't believe it could happen. It happened. Europe has known their share of terror attacks throughout the years, not in such a magnitude, not in such a fashion. So be aware, prepare, defend. They managed to persuade so many people that Israel is the Goliath in this story rather than the David that it really is. We're a small, tiny country. We are extremely outnumbered comparing to the Muslim world of 1.2 billion people.
Is there a political will here in Israel to attempt to topple the regime in Iran?
There is no other precedent in the history of mankind, as far as I know, of a people that for 2,000 years have not forgotten their ancestral homeland. Next year in Jerusalem, and we are so fortunate to live in a generation that have fulfilled this dream. We have came back to Jerusalem, but this time, never to leave again.
The Speaker of the Knesset.
Welcome to the Knesset, Stefan. Welcome to Jerusalem, and hello, viewers.
Thank you so much for having us. I'd like to start this by asking you a question that doesn't directly link to Israel, but rather to the general West. What are the key lessons that the West can learn from Israel?
Listen to those who threaten you. Listen to your enemies. Believe them when they say, we will eliminate you. Eliminate not only in the physical sense, but in the spiritual, in the ideology sense as well. You know, for the Ayatollah regime of Iran, Israel is indeed the small Satan, and it has been trying to eliminate it through their proxies and themselves. But the United States of America and the West are the big Satan. This is what we failed to listen to before October 7th. We knew Hamas was a terror organization devoted to kill Israel, but we didn't really prepare ourselves for such huge mass murder as we experienced on October 7th. So we have learned the lesson. I hope that the Western world will learn the lesson as well, because it may seem like a local conflict here. We need to look at the big picture. This is what Samuel Huntington referred to as the clash of civilizations. On the one hand, the radical Shiite Islam trying to force themselves upon the region and later on the world with their dark policies and their intolerance towards women, towards LGBTs, freedom of speech, and so on. And on the other hand, we have the free world, but within it, we have the useful idiots, the woke organizations, the progressives, the extreme left that works against our immune system as a free world. This is what they do. So I think the lesson is we need to believe our enemies when they say we are after you and we will eliminate you. We need to believe that they are about to do so and prepare ourselves and defend ourselves.
How big of a threat is the Islamic regime in Iran, not just to Israel, but more broadly to the West?
Well, it's not only to the West, it is also to the moderate Arab countries, to the Sunnite world, that they pose a threat to. I think many countries realize that. I was fortunate enough to be a minister in the government that signed the Abraham Accords. You know, for many years, we in Israel were told, you will not reach a peace agreement with any other country. We had Egypt and Jordan until you resolve your conflict with the Palestinians. And so many governments didn't even try. But we managed to bring 4 Arab Muslim countries to the table, to a normalization, one of which was the country where both my parents were born and raised, that is Morocco, which later on I came to visit. It is quite an historic visit. The first time that a speaker of Knesset is visiting a parliament of a Muslim country. That was Morocco, of course. And we were on the verge of expanding the circle of peace even further with other moderate Sunnite countries. Saudi Arabia is the main one, of course. And this is exactly what Iran was trying to stop through their proxies of Hamas and Hezbollah. Gladly, so far, we can say no country has been backing off the Abraham Accords, as well as we hear positive statements coming from Saudi Arabia that the normalization with Israel is still on the table. So this is the path, this is the way we should go to, and we believe we can make peace, but from a powerful position, from a position that we will rebuild our deterrence in the region, which was severely harmed on October 7th, but I believe is being re-established in the region.
There's been two direct attacks by the Islamic regime on Israel, one on the April 13th and one on October 1st or the night of October 2nd. There have been two retaliations. Does Israel want its Western allies and partners to partake in these responses against Iran? And is there a political will here in Israel to attempt to topple the regime in Iran?
There has not been merely two attacks from Iran to Israel. There has been countless attacks through their proxies. You know, we can talk about Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Hezbollah, the Shiite militias, the Houthis. These are all merely proxies of Iran. So there has been countless attacks towards Israel, two of which were directly from Iranian soil. They have made a big mistake. Their most powerful proxy, Hezbollah, is severely damaged. Hamas is severely damaged. None of the leaders of those two terror organizations, almost none, lives. And we will not stop until we can take the threat of our civilians, which is an obligation not only of Israel, but of any country towards their civilians. This is our number one commitment. We need to return the 101 hostages that are still kept in captivity by Hamas in Gaza. We need to return the tens of thousands of displaced civilians to their villages up north, and we need to restore security and safety in the region, which is what we are doing.
How much of a threat do you think that the radical movements in the West, there is a strange alliance that have taken shape, they call it the Red-Green Alliance, the alliance between the neo-communists, if you will, and Islamists, and it's taken place in the most unlikely of places because it's taken place in the West. And there's this great strength fermenting there that is very, very deeply anti-Zionist, and it would appear that that is one of the main reasons that it even is in an alliance. How much of a threat do you, when you look at threats that are surrounding your country, how much of a threat do you think they are in comparison to, for example, Iran? Is that even a comparison that has ever crossed your mind?
Well, it was the late leader of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, that said, "We shall conquer Europe without a single shot." And it was, as I mentioned before, Samuel Huntington that was talking about the clash of civilizations. I believe this is what we are experiencing now with the waves of migration coming towards European countries. When we are talking about small numbers, they seek to assimilate, which is good, which is nice. When we are talking about large numbers, they seek to dominate, which could be dangerous to the DNA of the country, of their culture, of their religion and beliefs. This is one of the reasons why a country should be able to control their borders, to moderate the numbers of migrants coming towards their borders. And I think some countries were not aware of the danger in Europe. And I hope that now more and more people, this is at least my hope and belief, more and more people see it the way it is.
Why do you think that many European countries were so naive about allowing large numbers of migrants, refugees from majority Muslim countries, where there was no doubt as to what the culture and customs were in these countries that the newcomers were coming from?
But I think there was doubt as to the intention. Because as I said, when it is small numbers, they seek to assimilate and they adapt themselves to the way of life in that country. But as the numbers grow larger and larger, they seek to preserve their heritage and religion and way of life, which is not a Western way of life. It does not cherish the freedoms that we in the free world cherish. And that is the problem. It's not a matter of naivete, it's a matter of awareness. This is what I believe. But I think now more and more people are aware, and I hope that we shall see it within the alliances between the countries and between Israel and the Western world. Because now, when we are fighting, we are not only fighting for Israel, we are fighting for the free world. Is there anyone that thinks that if, God forbid, we lose this war, and let me take it even further, the state of Israel will be vaporized, they will stop? Is there anyone who thinks that? Of course not.
I think there are people who think that, though.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Really?
They just hate us more than anything else. So they wish that Israel would vaporize.
I really believe that the liberal,
the
kids
woke
on campuses waving Palestinian flags, I really do believe that they are naive. I really want to believe that they go to these campuses, they're sitting in their tents, they're shouting free Palestine.
really stupid.
They're convinced that if Israel disappears, the Palestinians can return to their land, they will establish a lovely, peaceful Palestine, and everyone will live happily ever after.
Let me tell you, Stefan, I think they are merely stupid. They do not realize what the big picture is. They romanticize the
idea of the noble
the
savage.
idea and the movements for what they are not, because they do not realize that if indeed the radical Islam, Shiite Islam would rule, gays will be hanged, as they do in Tehran and in Gaza. Women will not be allowed to drive a car or to walk freely without a burqa, and so on and so forth. And they cannot express themselves with the freedom of expression. So I think they are merely stupid.
What do you think are some of the intellectual reasons that these movements have become so strong in the West? Because these aren't isolated cases. We're not speaking about a few hundred people. We are speaking about, we have seen the scale of the marches in London, in Washington, in Toronto. We've seen the demonstrations on all the major college campuses. This isn't a fringe phenomena. This is actually quite a deep-rooted movement.
Well, first,
what are the intellectual? Where does the intellectual foundation come from?
First, we need to recognize that there is big money flowing to those organizations from the many of the Islamic world. Many of the radicals fund those organizations, those progressive organizations. They manage to persuade so many people that Israel is the Goliath in this story rather than the David that it really is. We're a small, tiny country. We are extremely, extremely outnumbered comparing to the Muslim world of 1.2.3 people. 56 Muslim countries, 21 Arab countries, most of which were at least extremely hostile towards Israel. But recently we managed to change and to shift many of them. Now many of them realize that Iran is an enemy of them as much as it is an enemy of Israel. But it's a process. It's taken years, it has taken years, and it will take years until we can achieve peace in our region.
October 7th was one of the most traumatic experiences in the history of the Israeli state.
The most, I believe we can honestly say, the most traumatic event. And we are still deeply traumatized. And we will be traumatized, I think, for centuries, many years after we are all gone. What we don't have is the luxury to wallow in grief and pain because we need to fight. That this is what the, may I say, holy soldiers of the IDF have been doing since, and this is what the state of Israel has been doing since October 7th. And we will create a better future for children on both sides of the fence of this region, and we are absolutely certain that we shall triumph this war.
Do you think that an event like October 7th is possible in the Western world, outside of Israel?
The answer is yes. We did not believe that was one of our mistakes, that such an event could take place here in Israel. So I'm saying to everyone watching us, from London to Paris to Warsaw to Rome, we didn't believe it could happen. It happened. You should believe it can happen. Europe has known their share of terror attacks throughout the years. Not in such a magnitude, not in such a fashion as October 7th. But who can tell me it is impossible in Europe? No one. No one can tell me. So be aware, prepare, defend.
Yeah, this is quite worrying. I'm thinking about that. I was going through my head through a list of terror attacks that have taken place in Europe in the last few years, from the Bataclan to Nice, to the murder of Père Hamel, to the murder of Samuel Paty, the liberal French teacher who was teaching in the banlieue parisienne, and who was, teaching the values of. He wasn't an ideologue. He was merely a representative of the French laïcité, the idea of secular France.
Charlie Hebdo,
Of course.
Hyper Kasher.
What are some of the concrete steps, as an Israeli and as an Israeli politician? You represent a country that is highly militarized, that has compulsory training, that has very strong borders. These are all things that you have implemented out of necessity rather than out of desire. It's not. Would that be a correct assessment?
Yes, of course.
What are some of the concrete steps, if you were to be hired as an advisor by the European Union as a security expert, what are some of the concrete steps that you would suggest for Europe to implement over the coming decade, for example?
Number one, I would say in Israel, military service is mandatory. We have been amusing ourselves with the idea that maybe we don't need it anymore because the age of the big wars is over, and peace is on the way. But of course, now we have left this fantasy. I have been in touch with many of the German politicians throughout the years, and in Germany, it used to be mandatory, but they have passed a bill that it is no longer mandatory. Many of the German politicians regret that they have passed this bill. They wish they could go back. It's not easy politically wise. For several reasons. One is, of course, they need to be strong. They need to face the threats. But the second reason, it had a great way to integrate the different parts of society, to bring them back together. This is a very positive side effect of the military service. We have it here in Israel. Mandatory military service, I would do that. Second thing, it's always a trade-off between the liberties and the security. Give you one example. In Israel, if you walk into a shopping mall, and it has been like this for many, many years, you open your bag and you let the security guard to go into your things to make sure that there is no explosives, weapons, and so on. Now, is it a violation of privacy? Yes, it is. But we take it as a normal thing because life comes first. We need to defend life. I think in Europe, many countries have yet to realize that idea, that life comes before other things that we do cherish. We do cherish the privacy, and and we would not like anyone to just shove their hands into our bags. But it's a price we are willing to pay to defend lives. It's just one example, but in this trade-off, I think that more and more European countries need to shift a bit more to preserving life, to security, to defend themselves, even if they pay a price for that.
What is the current breakdown of threats that Israel is facing? If you could explain it in a sort of holistic way.
The number one threat is, of course, the Ayatollah regime of Iran, which, as I said, poses a threat not only to Israel, but to peace entirely through their proxies. Now, let's go on about the proxies. With Hamas, I can tell you that we have destroyed completely probably 95% of their missile launching capabilities. We have eliminated their almost entirely their military leadership. The one that is still left is Mohammed Sinwar, the brother of Yahya Sinwar. We have returned most of our hostages, mainly through the deal, some through military operations, but still 101 to go. And we are obligated to bring all of them back to their families. And we have probably destroyed tens of kilometers of the terror tunnels underneath the Gaza Strip, but still hundreds of more kilometers to go. So we still have a way to go until we can say we have brought a total unmitigated defeat to Hamas, which is the goal. Regarding Hezbollah, we have struck them very bad. They gotten some very serious blows. Of course, their mythological leader, Hassan Nasrallah, is no longer with us. We eliminated him as well as other Hezbollah leaders, but they are still firing towards our villages and settlements up north. So we need to continue until we can bring our displaced civilians back to their homes safely, which we cannot do right now. This is a very serious blow to Iran, to the Ayatollah regime. They expected we cannot attack them because they have Hezbollah on our borders, and they will strike hard. Hezbollah can no longer strike hard. Even when we have eliminated Hassan Nasrallah, they couldn't retaliate in such a fashion. So they still fire, but not as hard as they would like to be and as hard as the Iranian regime would like it to be. You know, it is up for the Iranian people who will rule them. It is up to them. We had great relations with the Iranian people before the revolution of 1979. My late cousin used to work there, building, not in the Mossad, he was building bridges and roads, and we had great friendships between the people, and we believe that it could come back. Not with this regime, not with the Ayatollah regime that declares openly we need to eliminate the state of Israel. This is our goal, which is what I said earlier. We need to listen to our enemies, to believe them when we hear such threats. My hope, truly, is that the Iranian people will realize they are very smart people,
Sure.
very educated people. Their GDP is 10% of our GDP. Why? Why is it so? They have great resources. They have way more resources than we have. The reason is because the regime invests in nuclear plants, in missile precision projects, in spreading terror throughout the region. This is why. So once the Iranian people decide they want to shift the regime, I believe it will bring better lives not only to the Iranians, but to the entire region. And this is my hope.
You've been winning militarily, there's no doubt about that, and you've been doing well against Iran's proxies in general, and even the Iranian attacks. I think many in Israel were relieved in some sense that the capabilities that Iran displayed were lesser than assumed. But one field that you have been definitely underperforming is public relations. And one of the things that has happened is Israel's image in the world has, especially the Muslim world, we know already, broadly speaking, doesn't like you. But in the Western world, public opinion has truly taken a big turn against Israel, with many describing, and I think a key figure of hate for those in the Western world has become Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel is often described as an illiberal state. And I wanted to ask you about, is it an illiberal state, first and foremost? And is it a nationalist state? The word nationalist in the West has a very dirty connotation. It's often placed right next to sort of Nazism, neo-Nazism. And this is how oftentimes the Israeli government or regime, in the words of your detractors, that's how it's described, as illiberal and nationalist.
Well, in Hebrew, there are two different terms to describe nationalism. One is leumanut. This is the bad term. This is how you would describe it. And the other is leumiyut, which means to respect and cherish your nationality as Israeli. Now, many years ago, the UN have passed a resolution saying that Zionism is racism. And even today, we hear many say, we have no problems with the Jews. We are against the Zionists. What is Zionism? This is a question I think people should ask themselves. Now, Zionism is the belief that the Jewish people too has a right for a state of their own. This is what Zionism means. Those who established this country came out of pure Zionism. As they said, for 2,000 years, we were exiled from our homeland, from our ancestral homeland. This is the land of Israel. And we have been facing persecution and pogroms and inquisition and even the Holocaust. No more. No more. We will reestablish our homeland, our state, the Israeli state. And you know what is the most important difference between those days of the Holocaust and these days of October 7th? Yes, still there is much hatred towards the Jewish people. Yes, still they kill and murder and burn and rape Jewish people. The one and only difference, now we can strike back. Now we fight back. And this only is possible because of Zionism, because we have a state of our own. And this is what they want to take away from us, to go back to the good old day of Auschwitz. This is the true meaning of saying we are against Zionism. Not only that Zionism is not racism, Zionism is the one and only answer to the racism that we have been facing for too long. We, the Jewish people, have been facing for too long. This is the one and only reason that we came back to our home, to our ancestral home. And in fact, for 2,000 years, Jews living in Warsaw and in Russia and in Germany and in Morocco and in Yemen and in Iraq have not forgotten one thing that they have prayed to and yearned to year after year. The prayer is next year in Jerusalem. Next year in Jerusalem. Imagine that there is no other precedent in the history of mankind, as far as I know, of a people that for 2,000 years have not forgotten their ancestral homeland. Next year in Jerusalem. Next year in Jerusalem. And we are so fortunate to live in a generation that have fulfilled this dream. We have come back to Jerusalem, but this time never to live again.